Sporting Wales podcast.
Supported by Dragonbet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.
Hello and welcome to the Sporting Wales podcast, sponsored by Dragonbet and co-founded by Alex Cuthbert and Gareth Anscombe. I'm Geraint Hardy and I'm here to keep the guests in check as we look forward to the Sporting Wales week. Please remember to click follow and thanks for listening to this podcast. And this week in the studio, we have a 2005 Grand Slam winner in Robert Sidoli and a man who turned down England to play for Wales and scored a try against them to rub the salt in the wound. Former Wales prop and former Wales in the 20s coach Chris Horsman. A massive welcome to you both. Chris, to you straight away. Turning down England, bonus points for me straight away.
Yeah, it was interesting actually at the time, and I've sort of spoken about it quite a lot previously. For me, it was in terms of, obviously I was involved in the England age grade. It was, trained with the England squad when I was younger. Then obviously I had the 2 bouts of cancer. And it was a case where when I came back over to Wales and played for Bridgend, and I think for me, it was a sort of the fact that they invested in me. So when I was in a situation where I thought potentially my career was over and I was kind of, 23, 24 years of age, and I was sort of struggling to get back onto the sort of professional rugby sort of treadmill, so to speak, they gave me the opportunity, and I'm a great believer in sort of loyalty, but also there was just a feeling in terms of once I was over here, I was settled over here. I had a lot of respect for Alan Lewis. You remember Al? Then you said, he was a really good man.
Guy.
Yeah, outstanding guy in terms of the way he managed stuff. And it was an easy decision. I mean, obviously it was a bit of a risky one because I had to wait 18 months and I still had a couple of calls into the England squad at the time, but it just became easier and easier when I made that decision, and something I look back on really proud to have achieved, playing international rugby, I suppose, with the circumstances of getting there. But yeah, and it was nice to score against England.
And give it some.
At the stadium, yeah.
Rob, welcome to you as well, mate. Kudos for that, turning down English. Would the Welsh boys kind of clap that in as he comes into the squad?
Yeah, I first met Ors when the Warriors was formed. And I think that merger between the two playing squads was in my view, and it was quite seamless. The boys got on instantly, and meeting Ors and the talent that was in that Bridgend team the year of that merger was phenomenal. So to have that as a resource where he decided that his future aspiration was for Wales, I really respect that, because I had a kind of a similar kind of issue where with the Italian descent, both me and my brother were targeted, if you like, for an affiliation with the Italians. At that time, there was a big kind of a development program across all rugby playing countries, where the coach of Italy wanted to know who was affiliated with Italy and things. And me and my brother went out to Treviso, and we was shown around, and an interest was expressed. Because our names, we just started our profiles with Ebervale, my brother, and I was Pontypridd, and it's a lot to think about, because it's the opportunity to play at the highest level and something that you love doing, and the Italian interest came before I'd imagine I'd ever play for Wales, and the English interest obviously came in for him. So it's a big. It's a big opportunity. It takes a lot of thought. So to make that decision and not knowing if you are going to get an outcome in a decision to stay in Wales, it's a brave decision. So all kudos to that.
But I don't know about you, Sid, but I felt when I was doing it, I'm very goal orientated when I was throughout my career, and I kind of like set myself the target of playing for Wales when the initial interest came through the residency. And for me, then it was, I want to achieve that goal. I want to attain that goal. And I think particularly, as you said, with the merger of the Ponty boys and the Bridgend boys, as you said, it was seamless. It was quite good because very similar characters in the Bridgend setup and the Ponty setup. There was no egos. There was no airs or graces. We were all pretty rough and ready characters, really, if we're being honest about it. And it was quite a nice emergence. And for me, it was an opportunity of setting that goal, but also to play with your teammates that you play week in, week out at the international stage. That's a real big driver as well. So, that... As you said, that thought of potentially you could blow your knee out and it could be gone like that. But yeah, it was a really nice thing to do, and particularly to do with a lot of my teammates at the Warriors.
I spent my childhood in Sardis Road, a House of Pain, watching you play, and then running on the pitch and playing for hours when my dad was having a pint in the club and stuff. When the Celtic Warriors was formed, it was, as fans, it didn't go down well, let's be honest about it. But, like, how did you find it in that period there, Rob?
Look, as soon as you mentioned Ponty, I started smiling. I listened to John Alder last week, and he was on about the importance of connections and those type of conversations. And I was Merthyr product. The coaches there at Merthyr sensed they had an opportunity to join Ponty, and in all fairness to them, they had no qualms in pushing me forward into that environment, because they knew what the Ponty club represents in terms of the valleys as kind of the mecca of the clubs, and to have the opportunity to go there to try and begin a professional career was amazing. And part of the influence why maybe I didn't go the Italian route was because I met characters like Dale McIntosh, Paul John, all those type of teammates that at Ponty. It was just a phenomenal experience, and I think it was the 5 years or so there that I had in that environment was some of the happiest kind of memories, just because I was young, influential, a lot of values to be had there. And then when the merger was talked about, with everything that was about what was needed for Welsh rugby, again, a lot of those things as a player kind of went over my head. I didn't understand what the game's direction needed. I just enjoyed what I was doing. So there was a lot of kind of like trepidation, if you like. The Ponty following is what makes that club so great. They're passionate about the team. They're passionate about being represented in the Valley. So for the merger to happen and to be going across to Bridgend was a big unknown. That's why I was kind of, you've seen our interaction when we walked in. The chemistry between that set of boys and the Bridgend set of boys couldn't have been more aligned. So from a playing point of view, the merger between the players and the squad was quite seamless, and it was very evident how strong it was on the pitch. As an entity, then there's different challenges around that itself.
Yeah, but if you were getting on so well, Chris, for then to be kind of disbanded, that's a huge blow.
It was hugely disappointing, because I still think they missed a huge opportunity there. There is a need and there is a want, in my opinion, for a franchise, a team to be set up in the Valleys. It's the heartland of for me, for a lot of Welsh rugby. I remember my first experience going up to Ponty. They were in our group when I was playing for Bath. And it was, and I can never forget, after the game, Victor Abogo, he had one of his like African kaftans on, walked into the Ponty bar afterwards. And it just stuck in my mind. Like, but everyone was just coming up to him and speaking to him. But we had some great battles in the European Cup. But when that merger happened, it was such a good merger in terms of, if you just look at the quality of the squad. I think 1 to 23 were international players, but they were the right age profile. So they were all mid-20s. So you had a group of players there that were all on the same page in terms of their values. You had absolute abundance of talent. You had three really good rugby men, and Richard Webster, Alan Lewis, and Lynn Howes, in terms of the coaching setup. The support base was clearly there. I remember we played Munster. They were fully loaded. We were fully loaded, and we won. Supporters in the trees and stuff like that. So there was an absolute golden opportunity there to create, I think, what would have been a really strong regional representative team within Wales, both on and off the field. And the fact that it was just cut ruthlessly. I mean, me and Sid, we always talk about that every time we meet up, that how we were literally just auctioned out like cattle that day in the Vale. But for me, the biggest thing about it all was the fact that, yes, Ponty's still running there as a club, and it still has tremendous support, but there was such an opportunity there to have a community-based region that would have been represented by the community and would have represented the community, and more importantly, I think would have been a huge success on and off the field. That's the thing for me that still hurts.
Talk more about the Vale. You said there how you kind of got shipped off. What actually happened that day? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, so I think it's gone down in sort of Welsh folklore that day. Well, and to make it worse, we just played Connaught, didn't we, on the Friday? So we went out to Connaught. We played on the Friday. Saturday morning, we had the Kangaroo Court. Remember that? I remember that. Wow.
Survived.
Who was leading the Kangaroo Court?
Guilty.
Yeah.
So I was the judge. Mama Molatika was my enforcer.
Okay.
Richard Bryant, remember? He was the prosecution lawyer. who's actually a qualified lawyer at the time, and I see Havili was the defence lawyer I chose. He could barely speak a word of English.
Brilliant.
So I think it was what known as a kangaroo court. We had a great day. Brent Cobain stole the show early doors. I won't go into that, but it was a great day. We got back to the Vale on Sunday, all a bit dusty.
Yeah.
I think the Welsh boys, you all met up with the Welsh squad. I think you had fitness testing on the Monday. It reminds me. But anyway, I got a phone call from Richard Bryan on, I think it was Sunday night. And he said, I remember he just said, "Oh, we're gone." I said, "Well, what do you mean? The court wasn't that bad. Surely they're not sacking us all." He said, no, that's it. We're being put into liquidation. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we went to the Vale the next day. I think it was Moffat. Di Pickering stood in front of us and said, Leighton Samuels was linked to 50% of his stake in the Warriors. The union now own 100% of it. We'll let you know in the fullness of time. And we were like, no, we need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, we need some answers. And they were saying, no, well, we hold your contracts. So, you can't go looking for other teams.
So were they honouring the contracts at that point? So financially, was that continuing?
Well, there was absolutely, we'll let you know. And I think it was literally, a couple of days away from payday. And a lot of people had like end of season bonuses and what have you. And no one knew what was going on. We a few of us went to, I think were you part of the players? It was myself, you, Alfie, and Richard Bryan.
Yeah.
We had the conversation. And John. And we just said, we just need to know what's happening. We need to know now. It's not fair on the players. We need some certainty. People have families, bills to pay, So they said, okay, turn up at the Vale the next day, Tuesday morning, and you go in the Vale. Back then, offices to the left at the top of the stairs was a big conference room. To the right, we all just went in. They hadn't even put any chairs out for us, did they? So we were just sat on the floor. All the directors of rugby and the bigwigs from the WRU went to the left, and they basically just auctioned us out amongst themselves. And then we were literally, so that happened over the space of 2 hours, and then we were just pulled into a room, and they were said, either region's going to liquidation, here's the letter of liquidation to be one of the creditors, or here's a contract from one of the other regions. And that was it. It was literally in, out, brutal. I don't know what your memories of it said were.
I love how you remember there was no chairs. That's
Of
burned
course,
to the
one
most.
thing. It just kind of added to it. Like, you've got 35 guys who had just given their all that year, just sat on the floor waiting to find out if they had a job.
Yeah,
It paints a picture of school, doesn't it? Treating you like kids, I suppose, as well.
but the bit of context for me was the merger happened with the players. There was a lot of issues that had to be resolved. We had two fantastic venues, Bridgend, Pontypridd. Was one venue going to be used more there? All that kind of stuff was going on, and the main kind of factor for the players was we just had to try get things right on the pitch, because it was a very talented team led by an incredible coaching group, but it stumbled a little bit. We wasn't as dominant as what the page might show. So it took a bit of graft that year, and there was quite a few players who were in a jersey that's just been established. They were playing injured. We had the European qualification was the big kind of carrot that we had to attain that year, and part of the going away to Connacht to play the last game where everything was kind of confirmed with our involvement in Europe. The playing squad went, the non-playing squad went. It was a massive kind of push to get things settled about what the product was and how players were and the relationships there. And we had, from a playing point of view, professional point of view, we had a weekend there where a lot of good things happened, and we came back to that phone call, which was completely, it was out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. We knew there was debates about, the venues and things, but we had a lot of senior player meetings where a lot of that was addressed, and a lot of good solutions we felt were outlined. And to come back to that, it was still a lot of disbelief. And even now, just going into that room and what happened, it's difficult because there was a player with us, Mervyn Davis, Grand Slam winner in 05, and this is 2004, a leading kind of hooker, totally honest, proper rugby guy, you know.
Yeah.
And he was one of the players that come out of that meeting where, however bad it was from our point of view, where there was opportunity for the other regions, and I got no problem with this because that's part of the business. But they had first dibs on what players were going to be available, and a lot of the boys were fortunate to have those offers. Merv was one that didn't, and he had to come out of there just having been a leading kind of player to make the environment of the Warriors work and work well, and he had nothing. That was tough to see, tough to speak to about. And he went back to semi-pro life at Neath, and thankfully, I think it was in about 4 or 5 months, he got picked up at Gloucester, and his career re-established there, and he was then part of the Wales Grand Slam. So it was a very difficult time for the players, the coaches, the associated staff with the Warriors, people who were working in the hospitality. Everything about it was a really tough time, and I think to this day, you speak to the players, the biggest thing or the biggest compliment we can give to that type of experience is from a business point of view. I still don't understand it because that entity and the Valley's kind of following, if there's a business entity for where the rugby is now at, you want some kind of franchise with that player base, and it was there and it was let go. And that's still a huge disappointment in my view.
Again, it just goes down to the short-sighted decisions that were made. And I think that's something I think happens a lot in Welsh rugby, that there's short-sighted decisions and other people make decisions what's best for them at that particular time, as opposed to how are we going to invest in the whole of the game. Because for me, if the game's healthy across the board, it's all reflected glory. You can't just go, well, I'm going to be okay in my little patch, but it's not how it works. It's a global game. It's a global market. You have to think bigger than that.
So obviously, there's always rumours surrounding Welsh rugby of 4 regions becoming 3. Chris, if there was a change to be in the future, what learnings do you think WRU can make from what happened with the Warriors and kind of communicating that message and kind of making sure there's a smoother transition and an easier thing, or is it going to be brutal regardless of the way they go about it?
I think the biggest thing for me is that it's just transparency of decision making. Is not saying all options are on the table, everything's to be discussed. I think you look at any successful business, any successful leader, anything, they're very clear on what their end goal is. There's clarity in decision making. There's clarity in direction of travel. I think that's what you need to do. But also as well, you need to outline the reason why you're doing it. My biggest concern at the moment is everyone's going, well, we haven't got enough money in the pot. So let's say for argument's sake, round numbers, say there's 20 million pounds in the pot, and that's going, 5 million to you. My maths right? Rob, you are the teacher. Did I get that one right? And they go, okay, let's we want to change that to, I don't know, so roughly 7 million a region. But what will happen, and I guarantee what will happen, is just wages will just increase, because players are going to be players. They're going to say, well, there's more money in the pot. I've taken a 30-40% pay increase last year. Well, I'm an international. I want that money. And my concern is that the talent we have at the moment just eats up that extra £2 million per region. So if you're going to condense the regions and you have more capital and you have more intellectual capital, you've got to be clear on how you're going to divvy that up and what's it going to be spent to. So if I am, what's Nigel Walker's title now? Executive Director of Rugby. I'm going down to 3 regions. The reason I'm going to do this, because I believe that actually, when we look at the coaching quality that we have, I believe that the concentration of these coaches in these 3 regions will give us better output. I believe we'll be able to have better facilities in these 3 regions. I believe that we're able to ring fence £1 million extra for our development program. And if you can be clear on why you're doing it and the rationale behind you doing it, how you're divvying up the financial capital, the intellectual capital, you make those decisions and you go with it. And people may not like it, but at least you're honest, at least you're clear, at least you've set the rationale and they can get behind it. But if it's like, oh, it may be on the table, it may not be on the table. Oh, yeah, we're going to go down to 3. All of a sudden it happens like that. People are going to be bitter and twisted, which again goes back to the problem with the relationships in Welsh rugby. Every relationship in Welsh rugby I see is transactional. So a region only do something for the union because the union do something for them. It needs to be transformational. And you can only get that by clarity of what you're doing it. So for me, whether you go down to 3, whether you go down to 2, you've got to have a purpose. You've got to have a reason to do it. And you've got to make sure that where you're taking that savings of money, you're investing it in the right things, because you've seen it in every other sport. Most of the money in sport goes on one thing and one thing only: players' wages. But players move on.
Yeah.
Pathways, coaches, that's where you need infrastructure, fan experience, stadium. That's, if you're going to have a plan, and we've got to be honest, there doesn't seem many plans at the moment.
Yeah, and with guidelines within that plan as well, salary caps and stuff like that.
Accountability as well.
Yeah.
For not delivering it as well. For me, there's too many times that someone goes, we're going to make this decision in Welsh Rugby. It all goes wrong, but no one's held accountable. People have to put their names to stuff, have to be held accountable, because that's the only way you're going to improve stuff.
So do you think maybe that's where they've gone wrong in the last, 10 years behind the scenes, that money's been going to the top players and nothing's been going to the development of the game?
Yeah, I suppose it depends what sort of model you want to use. For my liking, Welsh Rugby has worked on like trickle down economics, where we're going to invest everything at the top. So we're going to have the best stadium, the national team are going to have the best coaches, best facilities, which, I understand. And effectively, that's going to generate success, which is going to generate revenue, and it's ultimately going to trickle down the pyramid. But it doesn't work in theory, because they'll just want more of the same. And also what you do is you just create an interest at the elite level. So you get a lot of people watching the Welsh national team, but they don't go and watch Welsh regional rugby. Yeah. So, I think they've had this trickle down approach, and I think that's wrong. I think what they've needed to do is they've needed to invest in like the infrastructure, the process, the plans. And I don't see a coherent plan within Welsh Rugby. So, the example I can link it to. So if you look at football, so 2010, England had the golden generation, Beckhams and all that lot. They got locked out of another World Cup in South Africa. So they developed St George's Park, but they put together the England DNA. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
It sets out a purpose of what they're about. Mm-hmm. It sets out a clear playing framework. It sets out clear player profiles, player skills. It sets out a supporting coaching structure and the support system. Why haven't we got something like that in Welsh Rugby?
Yeah.
That we can all go and connect that golden thread from the national team to grassroots. And that's what's missing for me, is that coherent plan.
Rob, you're coaching youngsters at the moment. What do you feel is missing? Where do you think there's gaps in it, and what would you like in terms of support to help kind of you with your role, but also the kids you're training?
Look, I don't like that term gaps, what's missing. I think there's a fear of everything just spiraling into negativity. I agree with Horse. I think clarity is fundamental. We work with John Older and other members about the development pathway, if you like. And the only thing I think is really important for me is just there's an opportunity as well where I don't want people to be pressured into making decisions that are going to be justification of a particular role they might have. I think the relationships that need to be fostered between the top down, the coaches and the players is hugely important. That just takes time. Just a quick example. I mentioned I joined Pontypridd from Merthyr. I joined Pontypridd on the back of, that was the season where a lot of established players left Pontypridd because of an opportunity elsewhere, whether it was abroad or to a different club. And and a lot of the players that joined that year were probably a bit too soon to be in that type of environment. I was still in university, still trying to work things out there. And through time and investment, players like myself, Michael Owen, Gethin Jenkins, Richard Parks, they all turned out to be pretty good players within the game going forward. So for me, patience is the key. The pathway I'm a part of with the Newport High Rugby Academy is a phenomenal pathway. It's not the pathway. I think that's the trepidation about clarity with the union. A frustration for me is the branding of that. There's an amazing opportunity for kids playing rugby in Wales to have a support, both educationally and rugby-wise, to forge a career going forward. And where there's been players missed at the younger age. There's new exciting developments now with the emerging player pathway program, where there's each development centre is trying to help kids at under 15s to develop what is the dual shield kind of branding. That's going to facilitate the Dragons and the 16s kind of identification process. And then you got your choices. You've got 16 institutions in Wales that are governed by the stakeholders they belong to, and they have been amazingly encouraging in providing an environment where a 16-year-old coming in for 2 years will get the best opportunity through rugby practice, gym development, the mentality behind the game, coping with social media, coping with a lot of different holistic kind of avenues, as well as the support with the education, because in the future, a rugby player can become a professional but could lose the job the following year. So to have that bit of balance at that age group is a phenomenal opportunity. It's not the only opportunity. You got some kids decide to stay with clubs, and if they got the right people around them at the clubs, it's just the opportunity with these institutions are the access to the people. There's level 3 minimum coaching standards there. There's level 4 coaching standards there. There's nutritionalists there now. There's S&C. There's, in our example at Newport High, we've invested in a social media contents guy this year to give the boys exposure to interviews after the game.
Yeah, good.
Dealing with understanding the social kind of interactions that might come from people's comments. You know, that's a big pressure on youngsters these days. So that pathway, I think, is exciting. And the investment in that pathway is just to make it more branded. And we get examples where some players might go across to England for, say, a Millfield of the world, private institutions. And it's not a comparison I don't think we should make. That's a private institution. They will pick who is a really talented rugby player and offer them something that like a state school or our schools can't offer. But what we do offer is that anyone who hasn't got that opportunity, who's still talented in rugby, can come into an amazing facility where they'll get their education and they'll get a coaching experience of the 2 years. That'll give them the best footing to deal with pressures with Wales under 18s, Wales under 20s. And there's a really good kind of execution rate here, where those players involved are going into these academies for the regions and are doing some really good things. It's retention of those players.
Yeah.
That's what's key then.
Yeah, again, well, especially kind of if they go in to England, which you've seen recently, and then turning their backs on Wales, it's making sure we can get them back over, isn't it, and playing for Wales.
Well, again, like just a little bit like what Horse was saying, is I hope we don't go to 3 regions. We got 4. I think the investment in the region has got to be about the identities and what they mean to the communities that they're in. And I think if a player goes abroad, I would challenge that maybe the identity for what they're missing out on hasn't been established well enough, and they haven't turned their back. I don't like that. They just had a different opportunity.
But also as well, sorry to cut across you there, Sid. There's been a lot of talk of, these players are going over to England, or we need to stop English academies being able to take them. We need to stop that. Well, no, hang on a minute. Why are they going? So don't look at what England are offering. Like, turn the mirror around, reflect on yourself, and ask yourself the question: why are our players leaving? What aren't we doing that's making our young players want to stay?
What is that at the moment then, do you think?
So again, look,
like Millfield, I was saying to John,
so when I was running the National 18s program,
yeah,
there's no way in the world I could sit down to a young 17-year-old lad, look him square in the eye and his mum and dad, and go, "You don't go to Millfield." How can you say that? If someone's offering 100%, 80% scholarship to one of the most incredible education environments to go and experience something in their life that we cannot offer, you can't stand in the way. So again, it goes back to relationships. I had a good relationship with John Mallett, who's director of rugby there, who's ex-teammate of Bath. So again, you don't compete with Millfield, you complement Millfield. So again, it's going, actually, we're the WIU, we're the national governing body. Look, how can we help add value to your young player who's in your school? So how can I help to add value to his journey? So simple things like when you look at a young player and they've got their traditional fixtures against Sedborough or Clifton Cole, and there's a Wales 18s camp on that weekend, I don't call him into that camp because that's a big traditional thing for the school. So it's about, again, it's transformational relationships. So we have to, one, work with him, not see him as a threat, because they're always going to do that. If we're just going to build walls, you're just going to play. It's like that analogy, you know, with the cattle farming in Australia. They've got these huge farms. They don't build a fence around to keep the animals in. They build wells in the middle to draw the animals in. And that's what we have to do from a Welsh perspective. We can't fence ourselves in. We have to make sure that what we're providing here is of value, and we have exit and entry strategies with it. And you build those relationships with those other people and those other entities.
Yeah. Just to support that, it's sometimes when the comparison is made is a perception that we haven't got something to compete. That for me is false. We have got plenty to compete. What's interesting to me, I'm just dealing with a couple of boys now in my academy and their parents is the perception that if they take an opportunity to go across the bridge, he had that opportunity a year ago and they decided to stay with what we could offer. Sometimes it's not to do with a comparison about what they're going to get that's different. It's the opportunities that are going to come when they graduate from that type of program. So if they go into the English kind of setup, the English League has got, at this moment in time, 10 professional clubs in the English League, whereas obviously it was a few more couple of years ago. We've got 4 regions, and in probably the best period that we've had with Wales at the highest of its peak, if you like, over the last 10 years in the Gatland era, we've had world-class players holding on to their positions and their journey, and opportunities for emerging players that come into just 4 institutions hasn't quite been enough, hence why they might be looking elsewhere. So sometimes it's about the player understanding, and if they commit to something and they graduate from something, what is the opportunity for them? And I think this is why I'm quite excited. Not excited, it's not the right word, but I'm quite optimistic that there's opportunities being had now where you can win that, your Mackenzie Martins. There's opportunities there to be established quicker within the region, and obviously to facilitate the Welsh brand.
But with that, my only concern, again, same with these young players and all these young players coming in, has that been by design this last year, or has it just been a consequence of the fact that everyone's just cut their numbers? So again, this way it goes back to having a coherent plan and a coherent strategy.
Totally agree.
And I think that has been what's missing for me over the last few years, particularly when Warren's had such a successful national side. You know, the old saying goes, you fix a roof while the sun is shining. And I don't think we did that from a Welsh perspective. I think we had such an amazing, successful national side, and incredible players, incredible management, filling the stadium down the road, generating huge revenue, but it wasn't redirected where it needed to go. And we've got to this point now where good things are happening, like Rob said, like good things. Young players are getting opportunities, but are they getting the opportunities the right way? When a youngster's brought in, I know comparison is the thief of joy. When you look at the Irish regions, when a young player's brought in, he's brought in surrounded by senior players and he's allowed to develop. It's a much better environment where all these things have happened in Welsh rugby at the moment, and it's just reactive.
Yeah, it's been thrown in.
It's just been thrown in. So we really, really need, and this is where this review, this endless another review of the WRU. I mean, again, it's like how many reviews do they have, and constantly bring in outside agencies to do it. If you're constantly doing that, you're never going to gain the ability to review your own product in house. But that's another topic. But I just really think that they need to come out and nail this rugby strategy. Yeah, because someone like you, Rob, if you're working in the pathway, having a clear understanding of what you're working to. So, it's this whole thing, like your job is to produce regional players, I imagine, or players to fill the pathway. But those players are going to come and go into the pathway regardless of how good or how bad your pathway is, because we need players coming through. But if you had a clear goal of which to work through, that's what I feel is missing in the pathway, like clarity of your objective of what you're going to do. I don't know if that is something that's missing or something you feel needs to be better?
I think there's differences across the regions about what that exact mission statement is. Like for me in the Dragons, I've always been privileged with, I got a good relationship with James Chaplin, who's been the academy manager there, Lewis Roberts now, and we've always had an aligned kind of view on that. So I've been very fortunate in that term. Like my view is we want to develop players for the future. Part of what we do is we filter as well. There's an expense to that development, and the holistic approach is about identifying, put the right pressures on these players at this age. Can they cope? Because those pressures are only going to mount when they get a bit older, and if they seem to be a little bit fragile, they get the support that's needed. But ultimately, if they can't cope with the expectations, then it makes the pathway a lot more clinical going forward, because there's players that we can really invest in that will have that kind of mindset. Because mindset is a huge part of development. The curiosity about the game needs to be fostered. What Horst was talking about there, it's that relationship and the clarity. It's like this new Super Rugby Cymru. It's that's a league now that's got a lot of kind of protocols in it to kind of foster good relationships, which I think is a huge kind of like positive. I can only go back to when I first got involved with coaching. When I retired, I was with Pontypridd at the time, and I was very fortunate that Dale McIntosh and Paul John were at the helm at the Cardiff Blues, and there was a great line of communication. There was discussions about players and what they needed from a development point of view from a Premiership team. The Big Cup was established as part of the Premiership, so players were coming to Ponty for particular reasons, players were going to Cardiff for particular reasons. And there was those couple of years I remember where the strategy worked really well, and players like you Jared Evans and you Thomas Williams, etc., have all kind of flourished. And I think that little bit of detail has been lost perhaps the last kind of 10 years. And this Super Rugby Cymru for me is a way now to regenerate those kind of communication lines that are desperately needed for clarity in what they want from a player and what that player's purpose is going to be over the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. We'll park that for now. But I
Going
think,
all day about that.
Chris, you've got your doubts about the plan, but you're feeling positive, I think, Robert, yeah?
Look, it's just a worry. I'm just the type that I like debate, I like argument. If meetings are happening, I like to think that there's arguments happening because people are passionate about things. I always remember, like a really good influence for me, I was very fortunate to be a part of a Wales setup when Steve Anson was the coach. And his view on coaching is it's well documented. He's going to be one of the best coaches in the world when he's revered. And he knew straight away that the Wales was quite colonial. You know, if someone's got a great idea, they don't share, they want to keep it to themselves. And I just think that if that can be addressed and people have got open minds and people are prepared to argue about it, there's opportunities that come from within that. So, you know, looking at the bigger picture, the 4 regions to 3, and for me, that's a huge kind of like, I don't think that's good for the game, regardless of whatever the financial circumstances are due to COVID. You don't know what's down the line with money that could come in. Get the identity back with the regions, so get the stadiums full. That's got to be a huge priority. And a large part of that is if we manage the development process right with these kids coming through, parents that are involved, if the identities are good and the relationships are good between the parents, myself at Newport High, or you got a College of Cymru or College of Gar, and they going into these regions and they got those identities, then it's going to be an interesting breeding ground for the next generation of player, in my view.
Yeah. Speaking of breeding grounds, the tour to Australia, that could be a breeding ground for some new talent. Who would you like to see on that plane to Australia, Chris? And props as well. You know, who would you like to be given a chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a position at the moment where we don't have particularly at the tight end, we don't have a huge amount of strength in depth and experience in that. I think for me, it's I think the players are naturally going to go on there. I think that, you know, most of the young players have been given an opportunity. I like to see Archie Griffiths, for boy from Bath. I think he's got something about him. He's got the physicality, he's got the shape, he's got the size. He's a good guy. I had coached him at the Wales 18s. He's a real character. We used to call him Boris Johnson.
Oh, really?
from Marlborough College. You know what I mean? But he got on so well with the boys. A really good character. I think he's someone in terms of that physicality, ball carrying on the gain line, both in attack and defence, could offer something. I suppose for me, it's not so much the players that I'm looking forward to seeing when we go out to Australia. It's actually just to see what style they're actually going to settle on from this Welsh team at the moment, because obviously over the previous era from Warren and his coaches, we knew exactly how Wales were going to play, and hugely successful, hugely physical, pressure, rugby, defence, all of that, and whether you're a fan of it or not. Me personally, ultimately, it's winning rugby, so how can you not be a fan of it? And I'd like to see the identity to develop at this Welsh side, because if I shut my eyes and if you say shut your eyes, think of South Africa, we can all have an image of how South Africa play, New Zealand, France, but when I shut my eyes and say think how Wales play now, it's confusion.
Yeah.
And I think for me it would be really important, whatever players he use. Yes, I'd like to see Mason Grady given a bit of an opportunity. I think settling on a halfback partnership, particularly at 10, I think would be really good. But just for me, it's just, let's see a style of rugby. Let's set our stall out. Let's go, okay, this is how we're going to play. Is it a case of this is how I coach, and it's been successful from Warren's point of view, and I'm going to mold the players into that way of playing? Or do I go, okay, I'm going to look at this profile of the team. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Right, this is the direction of travel that we're going to take this team for the next 4-year cycle. So for me, that's going to be interesting to see how they do, because it has been a bit confusing over the last few internationals.
Yeah. What was your thoughts on Gatland's prop selections for the Six Nations? Because I don't know what happens in the front row. Many of us don't. Do you know what I mean? But,
this is carnage.
But you So when you saw them, kind of some of them chucked in, what kind of fears did you have, or were you positive about it? Kind of that exposure.
It's one of those positions, particularly in the front row. You're going to have to take a few hide-ins. It's basically the only way you learn. And I'm always a great believer in, particularly working with young front row players, is that you have to be patient with them and you have to give them the time, because it's one of those positions, if you get an absolute mauling on a Saturday live on TV in front of millions of people, it's bloody demoralising, because it's one of those few positions where your opposite number can literally go, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm better than you, and I'm going to physically dominate you from minute 1 to minute 80. And it can have a huge impact on a young player's development. So I was, worried for some of those young players going into those environments, but, you need the other forwards around them to support, because it's not just a one-person operation, the scrum. But for me, the crucial thing is, if we're giving these young players an opportunity, young props, young fly halves, we have to have an element of patience with them. We can't go, we're going to throw this young 21, 22-year-old tight head against Ireland and watch him get an absolute beast in and go, well,
he's gone.
He's no good. Because remember Gethin? His scrummaging wasn't great when he first came in. He's probably arguably the greatest modern-day rugby player ever, because yes, he didn't. I mean, he hates scrummaging training.
Just ask Adam about his 30 minutes. Remember that?
Yeah, exactly. But
Adam Jones, sorry.
Adam.
He had to play. He started the internationals. He'd play 30 mintes,
right?
And then Gethin Jenkins would come on, and he would play tight dead when he was obviously more the loose head. But at that time, Adam needed to be blooded with 30 minutes in that position because of what was involved, and then Gethin would come in and finish the game for him. So
you do need this patience with these young players, particularly front row forwards. You can't expect a 22-year-old to be able to go against a 28-year-old, because there's a difference in physicality, miles on the clock. And if these players are showing promise at regional level, if they're the best that we have, you have to stick with them. You have to give them the patience, and you have to mentor them through that process. And that's one thing I would say to the people who watch the Welsh national side at the moment with all these young players in, is we have to be patient with them. Yes, we can say if someone makes a mistake, but none of these players are making effort mistakes. They're all going out there and giving their absolute damnedest for that red jersey. Because me and Sid have been in situations where we've lost to Italy and stuff in the Welsh jersey. And one thing I can say is every player goes out there and gives their absolute all. So the criticism shouldn't be for these young players. The criticism should be for the reason why they're having to be thrown in inexperience. Save the criticism for the people that have created the situation where they are. We have to get behind this young team. They have to have our support.
Yeah, patience definitely key, isn't it? Second row is a hot topic as well. Six Nations. Who would you like to see on that plane playing? If starting 15 for Wales against Australia?
Yeah, look, for me, first and foremost is I give it a couple of names now, but it's whether the younger players coming through, just those that have played well for the regions. And deserve the opportunity to go across. I think it's an exciting opportunity for Sid Gatland and his coaching team, where we talk about a period where they've been really successful and yet a brand of rugby that some people got a lot of different views on. I think it's a real opportunity, though. Whoever he takes now, it might be an opportunity where he's got to work out the brand that's going to fit. So I think that's going to be an interesting time. We're right at the beginning of a 4-year cycle for the new World Cup. And we're going out to Australia, where they're in a very similar position, where they're trying to find their brand. For me, I'd like to see, from a second row point of view, obviously a couple of the youngsters that are injured now. That's just a sadness for them. But I'd like to see Ben Carter re-establish himself in that environment. I think. I've worked with him at Newport High, so there's a little bit of bias there, but I just see a lot of potential about him as a player in that position. A couple of stalwarts, like Dav Jenkins is going to go. I kind of on the fence a little bit about. I'm a bit worried whether they might try and cover the position with back row. I haven't got a strong view on that at the minute. I think that might be something they might just have to do. With the specialisms that are across the 4 regions. But I definitely like to see a Ben Carter get his opportunity, and I'd like to see, speaking outside of kind of like my remit, maybe I'd like to see like the 10s, a Ewan Lloyd and a Will Reid. Try something them where they could have a lot of influence and shape on regions going forward. And to be involved in a Welsh environment might be the perfect opportunity for them. Again, a little bit biased because Ewan Lloyd, his grandfather, coached me as a Merthyr youth player.
Okay.
So, it's not like you to be biased, Sid, is it? So,
That's all right.
But
you
I
have
just
half
think
the Newport High in the Welsh team.
I think those 2 players in particular are exciting young players, and I think they've done enough in the jersey for the region to warrant an opportunity to go to somewhere like Australia, where the brand is they'll be exposed to let's play and let's have a go. Whereas South Africa is a lot more traditional. Yeah. There's a different kind of philosophy needed there. So I hope he takes those players that have perhaps going to bring another dimension to how we might want to play.
Yeah, it's a chance for some of the youngsters who go to showcase their skills for sure. We've got to touch on Judgement Day as well. Ospreys are the only team kind of with anything to play for, really, trying to get in that top 8. It's going to be really difficult for Ospreys to need 5 points out of that game, and they'll know, I think, they will know before they play what the lay of the land is. So that'll be interesting. Just to quickly on Judgement Day, a fan of it generally?
Yeah, I think I think it's a good idea, particularly when it's at the Principality. I think it's a great venue, the stadium, in terms of getting all the teams down on one day, the supporters, the Cardiff, what it has to offer. It's a good family day. I've been there several times and always thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's good value for money.
Yeah,
I think it's a good experience. It's a good way of selling our product. But this year, it's kind of, we've limped into it, haven't we?
It's hard.
It's obviously, I understand the decisions. Is it Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Will you be at that concert, Sid? I can imagine you in front row there with your little sign.
He's in the golden circle.
My daughters love her.
But I can, obviously if she's there for a couple of days, obviously it's a business decision. But I think maybe even if it was at the stadium, I think this year we're kind of limping to the end of the season from a regional perspective. Yeah. I think there's a feeling of let's get this season done. It's almost like we've got through it. It's like a sigh of relief. Like, okay, but I think the biggest thing is there's no jeopardy on it.
Yeah, that's the thing. And also, that phrase of kind of they're already on the beach. No one wants to get injured the last game of the season, do they? Do you know what I mean? So that does affect kind of everything involved in the whole day, Rob.
Yeah, that that could be true for, depending where you are in the season, your last game, whether it's at your venue or if it's for an occasion like this. I just think the timing of it just it's not rightly placed for me. It's but I do like the concept of Judgement Day since its inception. We've both been involved as players and now as supporters. I think it's a great opportunity to see the best of what's on offer playing against each other, and obviously there's not a lot of jeopardy on it, which would have more of an influence, I think, with the supporters and some of the players who might be thinking about that tour. But for me, I just think it's, if you are a part of these games with a tour on the corner, that's the jeopardy that perhaps they need to be focused on. If they play well and they show what they're about, there's no better incentive than to be involved in a Welsh tour that could be a starting or the building block for a big campaign leading to the next World Cup. So
there's the pep talk right there.
it's the wrong time, but I love the concept of what it's about.
I think it's great. I think it would be great over Christmas. I think that would be a really good time to have at the stadium. Everyone likes to go out. Was it Black Friday? Have the double header on that weekend. You'd absolutely fill up
carnage.
The stadium.
Brilliant.
It would be carnage. But as Sid said, it's an opportunity for some people to go head to head. There's everything to play for at the moment in terms of national selection. People can put their hands up. But let's just hope they sell out a 30,000 seater stadium, because it would be a disappointment that if our national sport on the first weekend of June, when there's no competing interest with football, can't sell 30,000 tickets. I think it would be as I said, we've kind of limped this season. Yeah,
let's hope it's a good atmosphere, because we've seen it with the football, how amazing that stadium can be, Cardiff City Stadium. So hopefully there'll be a good atmosphere for those kind of on the beers and enjoying the rugby, and then the Champions League after they can watch as well, so they can make a day of it. No Dragon Bet with James Lovell today, but we will be doing our charity bet for Prostate Cymru and Latch, and we've all had a pep talk beforehand, and we're all in agreement with this, Chris, you're not changing your mind? We're going for a Cardiff win and a Dragons win. Is that correct?
The fact you were talking about betting, putting money on something where you might not get it back, was Sid, the tightest man in the... I know.
It's for charity.
That's the only reason he's doing it.
Look,
he's not arguing.
He's always got to bring that in, haven't he? I buy my rounds, pal. That's all I can say.
Ain't no fighting now, because you two have actually had a fight before, haven't you?
Yeah. It was a Welsh training session. That's one thing I always really liked about Sid. He's very similar character to me. He's no airs and graces. Trains as he plays. Very, Ponty boy, Merthyr boy. He's a tough character. And we're doing a line-out session, and he cheated. He decided to take me out in the air. No, not in the air. As I was lifting someone, bringing them down. So my boot accidentally kicked you on the head. It was just
lashed out.
And then the next thing I know, we were just on the floor, just scrapping. But it wasn't the first time. It wasn't the last time me and have done it. And that's one thing. I think that's why we got on so well, Ponty and Bridgend, because you came from Ponty, where you earn your stripes, and I came from Bath back in the era of the Andy Robinsons and the John Halls, where it was like first against second on a Thursday night. It was carnage. It was like literally it was a battle.
Brilliant though.
Graham Dawes, and I think we all had the same mentality that you go into training, you train as you play, and you do things by your actions. So yeah. But we were laughing about it afterwards.
It's a good memory.
Oh, I won the fight as well.
You have to get that in.
If you got to claim something, it's not true.
Yeah.
Like a silent spit.
But that is a video of it, right? Is there not?
Yeah, apparently, all sessions within the camp would have been filmed. So I think Gareth Jenkins used the video a week later in maybe like the Scrum 5 kind of documentary, just to show the competitiveness of the camp and things, because I think we'd had a tough campaign that year. So like you said, it was the loss is effective. Training gets a lot more interesting, let's say. And Chris had a little bit of a tantrum about what I'd done, and it ended up in an which was great about the sport. It ended up in an exchange of fighting, but like within 30 seconds after a little quick talk with Alfie and all that, we were going off the pitch laughing. It's just that's what sport is, and it's amazing.
And is that always the case, do you think, or have you been in situations where that feud has continued? I was watching the '99 Man United documentary on the weekend, and how Sharon and McCall just didn't speak forever.
It's weird. I mean, it depends about the culture of the environment.
Absolutely.
So I came from the culture with Bath, which was fostered by Jack Rowell, when he used to take Bath over to play Pontypool and stuff. I said, if we want to be the best team in England, we've got to go over on a Tuesday night to Pontypool and get the kicked out of us.
Yeah.
And that was the environment. So you went into that environment and it was about earning your stripes. It was about showing that you were prepared to put your shoulder to the wheel, that you were prepared to take the knocks, and you were gonna dig in. And I think if that's the accepted environment, then you're fine with it. Again, if it's not, where I've been at other clubs where I've done that in my first couple of weeks there, and I find like I'm never invited on socials or anything like that, because it's a different environment, it's a different culture. But Bath, Ponty, like Leicester are famous for it. It's what's accepted within the environment. So if it's culturally accepted in the environment, it's fine. But I've never had any issues with it.
It's not to condone violence or anything like that. It's the environment, the development aspect of this. This is why I'm so interested in this. Is you got that senior kind of element within your squad that have got values, and they set those values. And when you're in the environment, if someone steps outside of those values, or somebody's really pushing the boundaries, and it ends up in like it with me and Chris, it was an exchange of fists. But within that right environment, then it's not so much forgotten about, but it's not an issue. No. You just push on from it. And if it's, and I haven't been in an environment where it's ever been an issue. So the environments that fortunately I've been a part of, I've had the senior kind of those values that allow that to happen.
And that's where having good senior professionals.
It's essential.
So I remember my first day going into Bath in the old Lambridge training ground. You walk in, and there was a change room, 2 change rooms to your right, 2 change rooms to your left. One change room was completely empty. That's where you used to go in with Andy Robinson when you were dropped. There was a change room. The second change room was where all the young players went in. Then there was a third change room, which was the kind of up and coming, sort of established. And then there was the other change room where the likes of Jeremy Guscott, Ben Clark. And I remember one young player went in and put his bag in Jeremy Guscott's changing room. He went to the toilet and his bag came down the corridor. Now, some players that would really affect them, but it wasn't a case of being horrible. It was a case of going, you earn the right to come in here.
Yeah.
And that's when you have those good leaders. Because I've always say culture is a reflection of your leadership. So if you have a good leadership, you'll have a good culture. And that comes from those senior pros or senior players having those values. It's absolutely crucial. And that goes back to the development of players. You need to develop the characteristics of the players. Because if I said to you, tell me the best 3 things about Alan Wynne-Jones, you're going to say he's committed, he's hard, he's resilient. You're not going to tell me he's got a great left-handed pass or he can catch the ball. No. We, the best players, we normally talk about characteristics before we talk about skills. And I think that's the thing we need to focus on our development. And also the coaching now, again, it teaches players to remember. We're not teaching players to think. So in those environments when you're a young player, you have to think for yourself. And I think that's the couple of things that we miss a little bit, that little bit of hardship, that little bit of thinking for yourself. And those characteristics, I think they're so crucial to getting those young players.
That's underpinned for me, just curiosity. You got to have a curiosity about the game that you're involved in, and I think you talked about you're trying to unearth some things about the last 10 years and picking up on Cuthbert's points from your last podcast. It's the clarity in where you want development to go. So the curiosity is when someone wants to develop their position and they want to know how to get better. And a lot of that will be about developing their skills, and their characteristics then is when they go out and they play and they transfer those skills. And the academy should have that element where they go out and they're able to transfer the skills because they can play, and they play in an environment that has some kind of jeopardy. I agree with John Alder on that. Yeah. And with the academies over the last kind of maybe 10 years have fluctuated in that kind of ethos. They'll pull players for a strength and conditioning cycle, which on paper and with all the merits behind it will make the player bigger, stronger and more physical, but it doesn't feed the curiosity that they have about their game understanding. How are they going to be a more effective line-out operator or effective scrummager?
Yeah, again, with
you've got to have that curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that's where the clarity, this is, with the Super Rugby Cymru and the relationships, and we know that Chris Horsman as a young tight head, he's coming to, say, Newport, and we're going to have him for his season, to manage him for the season. That curiosity can be fed. And I think that's that in the right environment with the senior players, then it can set a value or standard to the culture about how far we can push them and test them. I think that's a really important aspect of what's about to come.
Yeah. It's been fantastic to have you both on, but we have to speak quickly about 05, because that Grand Slam was a great one. What's the one memory you've got from that Grand Slam season?
Just a group of players that I was with. It was the majority of that squad was the wooden spoon winners of 2003. So we and I've looked at some of the documentaries, but as a player, we're so insulated about what's going on and the pressures, how bad Wales was perceived in that kind of early period. So to be a part of those 5 wins with that group of players that we've kind of went on that development journey. South Africa tour for me was very much the tour that some of these guys might experience now at Australia, where we was a young core. So to be a part of it with them was an amazing experience, and probably we beat England at home, and I had family, my parents and my wife's parents in the stand, completely emotional over that win. That's what kind of set the tone in about something special could happen this season. To beat England like we did first up was an amazing experience. That's the game that stands just for the emotion of the game. That probably takes precedence over actually winning the Irish game. In a stadium in the capital city. It was just absolutely berserk that day. Just an amazing memory for a reward for the team that was put through a lot of tough times, if you would say. Yeah, it was a great outcome to have.
And is there anything in the house or in the office you've got from that kind of day up somewhere in the house?
When my dad, he retired, he can put his hand to anything. He put his hand towards carpentry. So the 5 jerseys that they have that I worn from those games, I've got framed. He made a special frame for them, so all 5 can be displayed. I got all the jerseys signed by the players, and I've just got that hanging up in my lounge, a small lounge. And then on the opposite side of the wall, I've got I got my Ponty jersey that we won the cup in, my first Wales jersey, and I got a Murph representation, and that's all my memorabilia in the house, and that's what encompasses, say, my kind of rugby journey, if you like.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll have to come and video it one day, that's for sure. We'll have to come and do that.
DragonBet, the bookmaker of Wales with the best odds on Welsh sport. Please gamble responsibly.
If you're going to be at Judgement Day, if you're going, quickly the odds on the games there: 4-7 Ospreys to beat Cardiff, 4-7 Scarlets to beat Dragons, 5-4 Cardiff to beat Ospreys, and 5-4 Dragons to beat the Scarlets. And make sure you do all your betting with DragonBet on that one. Thank you so much for your company, Rob. Chris, thanks for your company as well. Enjoy your week, whatever you're up to, and you at home. Thanks for listening once again today. Remember, we'll be back next Monday for more Sport in Wales chat, and you can follow us on all our socials. Just search Sport in Wales.
Sport in Wales podcast.
Supported by DragonBet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.